I always thought the worst kind of betrayal comes from strangers, until the night I caught my own sister sneaking into my lake house, believing I'd never find out what she was hiding inside. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Laura Wynn. I'm in my early 30s, and I inherited a quiet little lake house from my grandmother. After a painful breakup and years of trouble with my younger sister, Mira, I wanted a place where I could finally breathe. The lake house became that place. Or at least, I thought it was. On every visit, something felt wrong. A chair moved. Food missing. A light left on. I told myself I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew someone was coming inside. I started placing tiny markers around the house, and when they shifted, I understood it wasn't an accident. One night, I drove up unannounced. I hid my car and walked to the back door. When I stepped inside, my heart nearly stopped. Mira stood in the living room with a packed bag. She didn't even look surprised, more annoyed than guilty. After a lot of pushing, she admitted she'd been living there for weeks. She confessed she had stolen money from Dane, my ex, and he was after her. Then came the worst part, she told me she had been involved with him while I was still with him. My chest felt heavy, but something inside me hardened. I told her to leave. She tried to threaten me, but I recorded everything she said. That night, I took back my lake house and finally chose myself over the person who had hurt me the most. The lake house felt like the first quiet breath I had taken in years. After constantly feeling pushed aside by Myra's controlling ways, the place gave me a sense of space I didn't even realize I had been craving. Every time I unlocked the door, I felt something settle inside me, like the house itself was telling me I finally had room to grow on my own terms. I wanted to take my time fixing it up. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. I would stand on the small porch and imagine new paint, softer lights, and a garden where I could spend long evenings alone with my thoughts. I could picture myself sanding old cabinets, opening windows to let the lake breeze clear my head, and maybe even filling the shelves with things that reminded me of better times. The house still carried the warmth of my grandmother. Sometimes when I walked inside, I could almost hear her humming or feel her gentle presence in the creak of the floorboards. She loved calm mornings and slow days, and being there brought back pieces of her kindness that I had missed for so long. It made me want to protect the place and treat it with care, as if doing so might help me feel close to her again. More than anything, the lake house gave me permission to stop pretending everything was fine. I could sit by the water and let myself feel whatever surfaced, grief, relief, hope, all of it. I didn't need to impress anyone or defend myself from Myra's demands. I could finally listen to my own thoughts without being interrupted. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was stepping toward a life that belonged entirely to me. Each visit to the lake house started to leave me uneasy, like the space was shifting in ways I couldn't explain. The first thing I noticed was the curtains. I always left them tied back, but they began falling in different positions, sometimes half-closed, sometimes pulled tight like someone wanted privacy. I tried brushing it off as drafts or loose rods, yet something felt off. Then came the crumbs. I kept the kitchen spotless, so finding little trails on the counter didn't make sense. They weren't from anything I had brought with me, and the pattern looked careless, almost like someone grabbed a snack in a hurry. I would wipe everything clean, only to return days later and find new ones waiting for me. A smell lingered too, soft, sweet, familiar in a frustrating way. I would pause in the hallway and breathe in, trying to place it. It wasn't anything I used, and it didn't belong to the house. It drifted through the rooms like a ghost, disappearing before I could trace where it came from. Tools began vanishing next. A hammer here, a flashlight there. Small things, but I knew exactly where I kept them. I organized everything neatly in the shed, and the missing pieces made my stomach tighten. I didn't want to think someone else had been inside, but I couldn't ignore the growing list of things out of place. Furniture didn't help either. A chair angled differently. A pillow shifted. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make me question my own memory. I walked from room to room, trying to convince myself that I had moved them without noticing. But as the signs added up, that explanation felt thinner and thinner. I started wondering if a raccoon found a way in, or if it was something far more unsettling. I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to watch the house without being there. I started small. A thin thread across the bedroom doorway. A pebble placed right against the leg of a table. A strip of tape pressed lightly along the edge of a cabinet. Nothing obvious, nothing noticeable unless someone touched it. I wanted quiet proof, something that would tell me if the strange changes were real and not tricks of my mind. When I set the markers, I took my time, making sure each one would shift even with the slightest movement. I checked them twice before leaving, memorizing their exact positions. As I drove away that afternoon, a knot formed in my stomach, but I told myself this would settle everything. Either I would come back to everything untouched, or I would finally know someone had been crossing into my space. The next weekend, I returned earlier than usual. I walked inside slowly, scanning every corner. My eyes went straight to the bedroom doorway. The thread lay snapped on the floor. My chest tightened. I moved to the table. The pebble was several inches away from where I had placed it. In the kitchen, the taped cabinet edge was peeled back, barely hanging on. One marker disturbed might have been an accident. All of them disrupted meant something else entirely. A cold rush of fear ran through me, followed by a wave of heat that felt like anger. Someone had been inside again, moving freely through rooms that were supposed to be mine. I stood in the middle of the living room, forcing myself to breathe, trying to think. I went from window to window, staring outside at the quiet shoreline, wondering who could be slipping in. A nearby resident? Someone wandering through the area? Whoever it was, I knew now that I wasn't imagining a thing. Someone was coming into my lake house, and they weren't afraid to keep doing it. I made the trip without telling anyone where I was going. The closer I got, the tighter my grip became on the steering wheel. Instead of pulling up to the driveway like usual, I steered toward the old shed near the tree line, letting the branches hide the car from anyone looking out the windows. I sat for a moment, listening to the quiet, trying to steady myself before stepping out. The ground felt cold under my shoes as I moved toward the back of the house. I kept my steps slow, careful not to disturb the gravel or dry leaves. When I reached the porch, I paused, letting the silence press against my ears. That's when I heard it, soft movement on the other side of the door. Not the sounds of an animal. Too steady, too human. My pulse jumped. I leaned in, holding my breath, waiting for another sign. A light thump followed, then the faint rustle of fabric. Someone was definitely inside. I placed my hand on the knob, feeling a tremor run through my fingers, but I forced myself not to back away. I had come to get answers, and I wasn't leaving without them. I pushed the door open, bracing myself for a stranger. Instead, the sight in front of me almost knocked the air out of my chest. Mira stood in the center of the room, frozen mid-motion, a stuffed duffel bag resting at her feet. Her eyes widened the moment she saw me, as if she had been caught committing a crime she thought she'd gotten away with. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint echo of the door closing behind me. The shock hit me so hard it felt like the room tilted. The person sneaking into my place wasn't some unknown trespasser. It was my own sister. Mira didn't move at first. She just stared at me with wide, startled eyes, like she had been caught in a moment she couldn't talk her way out of. Her hands hovered awkwardly at her sides, and for a second she looked like a child trapped in a lie. Then she forced a weak smile, the kind she used whenever she wanted trouble to disappear without consequence. "I was just stopping in," she said quickly, her voice thin and shaky. "I didn't think you'd mind. I figured it wouldn't be a big deal." I glanced at the duffel bag resting beside her. It was zipped tight, stuffed to the point where the seams looked strained. There was nothing casual about it. Someone who simply stops by doesn't pack enough belongings to live out of. "Mira," I said, keeping my voice steady even though confusion spun through me, "why are you here? We haven't talked in so long. You knew this place wasn't open for anyone to use." She lifted her shoulders in a careless shrug, avoiding my eyes. I didn't think it mattered. I needed a place to stay for a bit, that's all. That's all? The words slipped out sharper than I intended. You've been coming in without asking, moving things, helping yourself to whatever you wanted. That isn't stopping by. Her gaze flicked toward the bag, then back to me. Her expression tightened, like she was searching for a story that might smooth everything over. But the room was too still, too heavy with the truth already hanging between us. I stepped closer, refusing to let her brush this off. Tell me the real reason, I said quietly. Right now. For the first time since I walked in, her confidence cracked. The silence that followed told me she knew the excuses weren't working, and that whatever she had been hiding was far more complicated than she wanted me to believe. Myra's shoulders slumped, and the last bit of her forced confidence slid away. She looked at the floor instead of at me, as if the truth was too heavy to deliver face to face. When she finally spoke, her voice came out low and uneven, nothing like the quick excuses she had tried earlier. I've been staying here, she said. Not just today. For a while. The words hit me like a cold wind. Weeks. Maybe longer. She didn't wait for me to react before continuing, almost as if getting it out quickly would make it hurt less. I didn't have anywhere else to go, she muttered. I needed somewhere safe. Safe from what? I asked, though a part of me already sensed the answer was worse than anything I'd imagined. She hesitated, then pressed her lips together before admitting, I took money from Dane. My stomach tightened. Hearing his name pulled up memories I had worked hard to bury, long nights of doubt, painful silence, the moment everything between us fell apart. I tried to steady myself, but Mira kept going. He found out, she said. He's been trying to track me down. I panicked, and this was the only place I knew he wouldn't check. The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching in. Yet she wasn't finished. Her hand shook slightly as she forced out the final blow. There's something else, she whispered. I was seeing him, before things ended between you two. For a second, I didn't understand. Then it clicked, and the shock was like a sharp crack in my chest. They had both betrayed me at the same time, behind my back, under my roof, during the months I thought I was losing him for reasons I couldn't explain. Mira looked at me then, her face pale, waiting for whatever came next. I couldn't speak. The truth had settled over everything, heavy and shattering, leaving no path back to the way things once were. The moment her confession settled in the air, something inside me gave way. It wasn't a sharp feeling but a slow, sinking drop, like the ground beneath me had quietly disappeared. I had already lived through the pain of losing someone I trusted, but hearing how deep the deception ran left me breathless. It was as if every step I'd taken to steady myself after the breakup had been wiped clean in an instant. I stood there, trying to process how the person I grew up protecting had used the only place that still felt like mine. The lake house had been my escape, the one corner of my life untouched by the past. Knowing that Mira had turned it into a hiding spot twisted everything I thought I could rely on. My chest felt tight as the reality set in. While I had been trying to heal, she had been slipping into the one space I thought was safe. Every moment I spent trying to rebuild myself suddenly felt fragile, like I had been placing my hopes on ground she had already stepped across without care. I moved toward the window, not to look outside but to steady myself. My hands trembled as I braced them against the frame. The water beyond the glass looked calm, completely unaware of the storm rolling through me. I could hear Mira behind me, shifting her weight, waiting for some kind of reaction, but I couldn't turn around yet. All the small things I noticed during my visits, the disturbances, the subtle changes, started connecting in my mind, forming a picture I didn't want to face. I thought I was imagining them, but they were signs of something much heavier. The ache wasn't just from what she had done. It came from seeing how little she thought of the place that held the pieces of my heart I'd been trying to mend. I turned toward her, the weight of everything pressing hard on my chest, and told her she needed to go. There was no anger in my voice at first, only a tired firmness. I couldn't allow her to stay another night under that roof. Mira shook her head, her expression shifting from guilt to stubborn defiance in seconds. I can't leave, she said, stepping closer as if that would change my mind. He's trying to track me down. You know what he's capable of. I'm safer here. I didn't move. That's not my responsibility, I said quietly. You can't hide here. You chose your path. You have to figure it out without dragging me into it. Her face hardened. You owe me, she snapped. We're blood. You don't get to turn your back on me now. The word "oh" stung more than I expected. She said it like I was required to clean up her mess, like my pain didn't matter, like everything she had done was something I should simply absorb. When I still didn't give in, she took a different tone, sharp, calculating, almost cold. If you force me out, she said, I'll tell things you won't want people hearing. I'll talk about what happened in our family. All of it. For a moment, I could almost feel my younger self standing beside me, the version of me who spent years bending so she wouldn't lash out, apologizing just to keep the peace, taking blame that wasn't mine. The same patterns were right there, reaching for me again. But this time, the familiar pressure only made me steadier. Her words didn't pull me back like they once did. Instead, they confirmed what I already knew: she wasn't asking for help. She was trying to keep control. And I wasn't willing to let her do that anymore. I felt a moment of clarity settle over me, cold and sharp. The weight pressing on my chest didn't crush me this time. Instead, it steeled me. Myra's words no longer had the power to twist my stomach or make me doubt myself. I understood that she thrived on control, but I didn't have to hand it back to her. I stepped slowly toward the tool drawer in the corner of the living room. My hands shook slightly, but my movements were deliberate. I pulled out the small recorder I always kept hidden, the one I had picked up years ago for emergencies. It clicked softly in my hand, a quiet weapon against the chaos she tried to unleash. Go on, I said, keeping my voice steady, letting her believe I was listening without emotion. Tell me everything. And she did. Her voice spilled into the device, confessions, admissions, all the tangled lies I had been piecing together in my mind for weeks. She spoke about staying in the lake house, taking Dane's money, the affair, and even her threats to expose family secrets. Every word hung heavy in the room, a record of everything she had tried to keep hidden. As I pressed the record button, I realized I wasn't just capturing her story, I was reclaiming my power. I had finally found a way to hold the truth in my hands without letting it shatter me. For the first time, the fear that had been following me for weeks felt distant. I had evidence, control, and a clear path forward. Mira could try to manipulate or intimidate, but now I had the upper hand, and I wasn't afraid to use it. I stood in the doorway, holding the recorder tightly, and spoke calmly. This is your last chance. You need to leave, now, without causing any more trouble. Myra's face twisted with anger. Her hands clenched at her sides, and her voice rose sharply. You're cold, Lara. I can't believe you do this to me. I didn't respond. I only watched as she grabbed the duffel bag, slammed it against the floor, and stormed out. The door shook with the force of her exit, and for a moment the house felt hollow, echoing with the tension she had carried inside. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing deeply to calm the rush of adrenaline. The storm she brought with her had passed, leaving the lake house still and quiet once again. For the first time in weeks, I felt the space truly belonged to me. Without wasting a moment, I retrieved my phone and contacted an attorney, a trusted friend of my grandmother who had always looked out for our family. I explained the situation, playing the recording for them so every detail of Myra's trespassing, theft, and threats was officially documented. Sending it off felt like locking a door that could never be opened again by her. I wasn't seeking revenge and anger, I was creating a safeguard, a record that protected me and the life I was trying to rebuild. As I hung up, the weight of the past week started to lift. The consequences for her actions were no longer something I needed to carry alone. I had set boundaries, taken steps to protect myself, and finally made it clear that my home, my peace, and my life were mine to keep. The house was quiet again, but it still felt heavy with the traces of Myra's presence. I moved slowly through each room, noticing small remnants she had left behind, crumpled receipts shoved under furniture, empty bottles tucked into corners, and the faint smell that lingered like a shadow of everything that had happened. I started in the kitchen, scrubbing counters and cabinets until they gleamed. Each swipe of the cloth felt like peeling away the past, removing the reminders of intrusion and deceit. In the living room, I gathered discarded papers, stacked them neatly to sort later, and dusted surfaces she had carelessly touched. Every sweep, every organized corner was a small victory. Upstairs, I opened closets and drawers, finding items she had left behind as if she expected to return. I bagged them up, ready to be removed from the house entirely. With every object cleared, the weight pressing on the room seemed to lighten, letting me breathe easier. Even the bedrooms weren't spared. I made the beds, fluffed pillows, and straightened rugs, turning the space back into a sanctuary instead of a hiding place. Each act, though simple, reminded me that I was the one who belonged here. By the time I stepped onto the porch and looked over the calm lake, I felt a sense of ownership settle over me. The cleaning wasn't just about tidying a house, it was about reclaiming control, restoring safety, and marking the space as mine once more. The lake house now felt alive with possibility, free from shadows that had once invaded it. Every corner I restored was a reminder that this place, finally, reflected me and no one else. Weeks later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Myra had been held accountable for her actions. She faced repercussions for taking the money and for all the ways she had tried to manipulate the people around her. It wasn't satisfaction that filled me, it was a quiet acknowledgement that justice had found its course without me needing to chase it. I spent that morning walking along the lake shore, the cool water lapping at my feet, and felt a calm I hadn't known in years. The wind brushed against my face, carrying away the last traces of anger and fear that had weighed me down. I realized that reclaiming the house wasn't only about removing her from the rooms or clearing the clutter she left behind. It was about untangling myself from the patterns that had allowed her to control pieces of my life for so long. Each step along the shore felt lighter than the last. I thought about the months I had spent under the shadow of betrayal and how every choice I had made since, setting boundaries, recording the truth, protecting my home, had built a bridge to this moment. I didn't need revenge in the dramatic sense, my peace, my sense of safety, and my freedom were proof enough. Sitting on a smooth rock at the water's edge, I let the sunlight warm my skin and the sound of the lake soothe my mind. For the first time in a long time, I felt untethered from the past, untangled from the pain, and certain that my decisions were for me and no one else. In that stillness, I understood something crucial: choosing myself was the strongest act I could commit, and it was finally mine to hold.